these 2.5 days of presentation, discussions, interactions. So we felt that we needed maybe a couple of minutes to reflect together with, I'm here today with Olivier, who is the country representative for UNHCR, to bring everything that we have heard together over the last 2.5 days and reflect and then maybe project of ourselves in terms of for us looking at on the next research conference, what is it that we're going to be taking over and then, taking forward. So Olivier, thank you for hosting us here, with the government of Côte d'Ivoire. You've heard, during the 3.5 days that we were here together, presentation, discussions, conversation on a number of topics related to forced displacement. We went from IPV to health, from labor market inclusions to social cohesion. So if you were to take a step back, what are your reflections at the end of this conference? And did you find any common thread, between those different, topics, but also the intervention from the practitioners and the policymakers? And which of those really, from a practitioner perspective, resonated more with you?
Thank you, Maisha. Well, it was so rich that I don't know if I will be able to describe the common trend, but certainly I can mention what resonates in me as a practitioner. First, I noted that most of the topics discussed during this conference and their outcomes are similar to some of my own reflections after, let's say, 30 years of career. Indeed, I am a witness that refugees are often considered as a burden, but we all know that they are working while they are in exiles. I am a witness also that a lot of humanitarian data are mentioning, for instance, gender-based violence, but without specifying the kind of gender-based violence we are talking about: domestic violence, intimate partner violence, early marriage, forced marriage, etc. And we have little research comparing the different kinds of gender-based violence affecting refugees. I'm also a witness, because I'm talking to them, that the abuses that refugees are suffering when they are leaving their country, when they are crossing the borders, when they are in the country of asylums, are triggering traumas, that it's difficult to rebuild oneself, to find a job when you are traumatized. But I also realized that there was little research on the well-being of the displaced. So we are saying sometimes you are not working, you are not doing anything, but do we realize the trauma that they are experiencing? I'm also, unfortunately, the witness of growing hostility towards displaced persons, making their integration or inclusion more and more difficult. And I know that there are discussions about returning people back home because if you are staying in our country and they are integrated, they will no longer return home. So I'm a witness of all these discussions, and I'm happy to see that during these 3 days, some of my reflection as a humanitarian practitioners on the front line were covered by different papers of this conference. I want to quote some of them: entrepreneurship in the context of forced displacement, the effect of forced migration on intimate partner violence, is giving working right to refugees hurting their host, refugee return and conflict, mental health and stigma, attitude towards refugees. I clearly understood the need for more research on these topics of forced displacement, and even other topics, like, for instance, the impact of refugees on agriculture, on environment, the impact of catch-based intervention? Is the religion now, but what is the impact on the local market? And let me end with some additional observation. The acknowledgement that the outcome of these studies are extremely informative. However, I have to say that there is no funding for us to finance them. Therefore, it makes more difficult for us to advocate, to convince government about our policies, what we are trying to do to change perceptions and find solutions. Two, it means that we must mobilize resources to have more research. And we are usually focusing on mobilizing resources, and we are right to do so, to provide shelter, protection, to respond to the immediate protection needs. And then we don't have money left to finance research. Three, humanitarian funding is shrinking. It means for me that we need also to encourage local research, support more research for displacement in the country where we are operating. In Africa, we must collect the in-country research that is already existing. And to do this, we need to do more partnerships with the academic world and with the others. And then four, we need to conduct research on the positive contributions made by the displaced persons, not only the challenges. And this is often lacking. This is why I really like the Ugandan case and the positive effect of refugees on development. So this is what I could say. Usually as UN, as practitioner, we are too often designing our policies based on incomplete data or only humanitarian data. And we don't always have the time to read these fantastic papers. We don't have the time to read the research which is published worldwide. So maybe I have a question to you, Aisha. What struck you from the presentations during the conference and from the perspective of the Joint Data Center, taking into account your extensive experience in the World Bank operations?
Thank you very much, Olivier. Let me start by acknowledging really the dynamic and the positive vibes within the room. And I've also seen so much interaction, no? The whole interactive conversation within the room, during coffee break, during lunch. So I think that was really something that was positive. Too bad for those that were online, no? So, and then since, I've also seen that so many of these papers are still not, on their final stage, so very good feedback coming in. I think that was something for me that was extremely positive that I wanted to acknowledge. So one other thing that also struck me that was also very important for me that, and then very, I think, grateful and seeing, gratifying seeing in the room was all the interlinkages between some of the researchers with the World Bank, UNHCR, some of them it's the World Bank led, with association or partnership with the researchers, some of it using the data from the World Bank or the UNHCR, some of this UNHCR, partnership. I think that was something that was very, very rewarding and gratifying to see, no? And then I think one thing that really struck me, and this is someone that has really worked across the bank, that, I've had the chances to work for the World Bank across different contexts, no? Different regions, no? So, and then listening to the fascinating work and findings that have been presenting over the last 2 and 5 days, and listening also to the policymakers. It's just like there's non-linear path between research and policymaking. and really, strike me, for me as a joint data center, to be think, what more could we be doing? How could we be leveraging really our very, unique position where we have access to the World Bank operation, access to the UNHCR operation, access to different, policymakers across the globe. How could we be leveraging more of this, no? And then thinking about, my operational expense, no? So maybe because my recent position was in Niger, where I was working as the deputy country manager of the World Bank operation, overseeing a portfolio of over $4.6 billion. So we were looking at, for some of you that's familiar with Niger, we were working on the three borders region, Tillaberi, no? So where we had like all the stars that line up for us to do something. We had the government that understood they needed to restore the social contract, they needed to, delivery says they needed to be back, right? Restore the, the role of the states, no? And then we have like a bunch of partners. It's not always the case that when you go somewhere where you have the partners that have all their priorities aligned. We were lucky enough to have that, right? With under the what we used to call the Sahel Alliance, which was the the Alliance of the Sahelian, where we had a representation from the development world, from the humanitarian, from INGO, from the government. Also, convening to try to see how we're going to be doing something on this specific region of Tel Aviv. And then to top of that, we have massive amount of resources, but we did not know what to do. We know we wanted to do something. And then also in terms of representation of the different forcibly displaced group, we had refugees that came from Burkina and Mali. We had the IDP within even the same, region that have been affected. And then we had returnees from some of these, these places. No, so we really could have had an impact. And what he really inspired me is just like, I wish I had access to this type of information to convey to that, platform for us that would have allowed us to be more impactful, more efficient, and more rapid in a context of a very volatile environment. I think that's something that really struck me. And I could say the same when I'm thinking about Jordan, no? So I worked in Jordan on the onset of the, Syrian crisis, right? We had investment labor market, active labor market programs that we would doing, social safety net around Mafraq, no, which is not far from the Zatari, camps. No, the same for Yemen, no, when we were working in Aden, where we had so large number of internally displaced. So I just, for me, that inspired me as a joint data center because of our convening power to really make sure that we convene this type of platform, but we make sure that we disseminate the work, some of these very much, there's no need to be reinventing in the wheel. And then in some of these contexts where you need action so rapidly, but also looking at, these things that have been tested, rigorous and everything, it's just for us to serve it and put it to the right hand of the, those ones that are looking at really making an impact under those contexts for the forcibly displaced, but also their hosts. In a nutshell, I think if I were to just somehow, how these 2.5 days have really, struck me and impacted me. So Olivier, then I have a follow-up question. My iPad will be open. Sorry. So one of the main ideas that we discussed during the event were how do we, again, I think I talked about it as I was, wrapping up my earlier point, is like, how do we bridge the gap between research and policymaking programming? And from a point of view of humanitarian actor like yourself, based in West Africa and overseeing multiple countries, in which way do you think that research become a tool for practitioners and policymakers, in the region that you're covering?
Yes, thank you, Aisha. Indeed, I am a UNHCR representative based in Abidjan, but I'm covering Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, Ghana, Liberia, and Togo, because they have something in common, is the influx of the Burkinabe refugees. And what I notice is that we are quite sometimes traditional in our research. We are focusing on country. We have a country-oriented research. what I would like to see in my context is more coastal countries research, comparisons between the 5 countries that I'm covering. So what I would like to see emerge from this conference is, yes, I said it already, more Africa research, more situation research. We have situation like the Lac Chad Basin, like the Sahel. And a bridge between the research and the policies put in place. This is very important. For instance, a comparison between the policies and the laws that we are implementing to receive these Burkinabe refugees. They are all coming from the same countries, but do we have the same laws or asylum policies? Here in the coastal countries, beyond the comparison between the asylum laws of the 5 countries, we have a lot of questions. For instance, we don't know if in the 5 countries we all have refugees crossing the border with their livestock. We know it is the case for some countries and some other not. We have Burkinabe refugees coming in the 5 countries, but do they share the same ethnic background? Are they all coming from the border? Are they coming from more inland? Do they cross to official border point or not? Do we have all Fulani being herders or only some of them? I remember once when we received a visit, we went to the refugee settlements and we had to call from the translators because the refugee was speaking Fulani, Pular. And then outside the settlements, people were speaking Jula. So I was expecting that the people in the settlements were Pearl and the people outside the settlement were Jula, but not at all. The people outside the settlement were also Pular, but they knew Jula. You see, so this kind of thing. So we also usually don't really know what people are making as a living in comparison with what they were doing in their country of origin. We have data on, for instance, they are cultivating, they are agriculture, but maybe this person was a teacher back home in Burkina. Or maybe he was a herder with his cattle, but because he could not cross with the cattle, he became a farmer. This is the kind of information which could be very useful for us, for the practitioners. But of course, I acknowledge that without this research, without this analysis, we are building policies and even response, but it's risky. It's risky because they are often our response is either based on security concerns from the government point of view, or from us only from based on humanitarian concerns. We want to save lives, and we don't go beyond what's next after we have saved the life. This is why, I know I will respond in practical terms to your question. Our multi-country office based in Abidjan has designed a data strategy that we want to put in place if we have the resources, my call, because we want to propose a different way to collect data in the 5 coastal countries that I'm covering. One, by working closely with government and academics from the coastal countries. 2, by working with the private sectors or foundations ready to fund research, because we do think that the research is only for us, that it's important for us, but it's also important for the others. I discussed in the corridors with a lot of young Ivorians who were asking me questions. I realized how interested they are in knowing what is happening in their own country with regard to the refugees in the north. 3, by collecting social and economic data on refugees and host communities. And 4, collect similar data in 3 or more countries receiving Burkina Faso refugees, and then compare them. Today, Aisha, studies with impact, such as entrepreneurship in Uganda, or social integration of IDPs in Mozambique, or, I hope it's not mine. Maybe it's mine, sorry. No, okay. Technology. So, for instance, I liked very much the study on the short meeting between host and displaced that our colleagues mentioned in Mozambique, to take in Mozambique. This is very important because as a practitioner, I remember that the researchers mentioned that now these meetings will be translated in government policies. But this is the kind of example that I could, for instance, use also here in the notes. What we need to do is to have an information which can really, and it's not the case yet, in most of the operations where I've been working, trigger a response based on facts, based on the finding of these papers, and based on the whole set of data that we usually have. I have a question for you, Aisha. I would like to ask you in return, how can the joint data center, and we know how much you are important for us, thanks for all the things that you are doing. You literally saved my life in Cameroon. How the joint data center help achieve an effective, and I'm insisting on effective, interface between research and policy makers? This was the question, but I would like to ask, and practitioners. And what are you already doing in this space in addition to the research conference?
Thank you very much, Olivier. Then just what I'm going to say, don't just take my word for it, because I'm so fascinating about the findings that I've heard from the different paper. What the Joint Data Center is doing, and this is our fourth strategic priority, and again, like I'm not saying because I want to, but because I've committed to Ellen and the other members of our management committee that we have a strategic priority, our first strategic priority, which is going to be looking at how do we operationalize, all of the data and evidence that's being produced, not just by us, but everybody else. No, so I think this is just to say, the importance that we at the Joint Data Center as, are giving to this, to really ensuring the dissemination and operationalization of research, and then this is here looking at this, spectrum of action, with a focus maybe on discoverability, access, digestibility, and also, and more importantly, implementation. Again, using the operation within our different parent institution. One other thing, and again, this is in the context of so many negative narratives that we are hearing, and we are talking with different stakeholders, both on the global size, but also on the global north, telling us, do you have data or evidence that allow us, as part of crafting policies, or as part that we are going to be talking our population, our constituents, what could you give us as evidence? And this, no matter how much ambitious the Joint Data Center is, we cannot do it all. So this we can promise that we are going to be using some of the researches that we have as part of our discussion to complement, some of the work that we are doing as a validation exercise or complementary, but because also we have not really covered this space. So this is, something that was rigorously, analyzed and tested. So we committed that we are going to be doing more of that. We also are going to be looking at again, we're not going to be reinventing the wheel. How do we use the World Bank and UNHCR operations and then feed them this, data and analysis as they're thinking about, piloting, scaling up, or intervention in these different contexts. That's what also something that we're going to be doing to making sure that we continue bridging that gap. We also have an important, agenda under the JDC, as part of our first strategic priority that Mr. Tabasso here is leading. That's the and you've heard one aspect of that, which was the marketplace. Under this knowledge agenda, we're looking at how do we do more of this platform, the research conferences, but also how do we bring in, some of the the researchers, but also some of the other practitioners on the issue around forced displacement. We are also, we do on a regular basis as part of our digest that we do, where we curate, some of the research that has been done in the region. The last one that we have done was on labor market outcome in the Eastern Horn and Africa. But also looking at, on our monthly newsletter, as part of our monthly newsletter, we do a literature review again, where we curate some of the latest research, available research that are in line with what we want to try to cover on that newsletter. We also, continue to try to do how do we, map, continue, helping with the mapping of data and evidence work that have been done, and then with the ultimate the continuing to filling on that gap, right? Dominique talked about the marketplace, where we really trying to be bringing some of these resources and idea, and then mapping it up with the, the practitioner or the policymakers, across the globe. We also, as part of this, bridging this gap, under the former umbrella of the Building the Evidence, design this training, on socioeconomic data that we also are going to be trying to be expanding, over the next year. So I think we have a commitment under our strategy. We're going to be using our convening power, talking with, government and different stakeholders around the spectrum. We're going to make sure that we make available or accessible some of the work that you have done. You heard yesterday Volker here committing as part of the MDL, the UNHCR microdata library. We could be also making available some of the work, the data that you have collected as part of some of the work. I think we're going to continue doing continuing that conversation, making sure that all of this research that we're doing is made available from every single user as a global public good. So we want to be extending the reach of the of the researchers, with connecting them with the different actors that can make an impact for the livelihood of the forcibly displaced. So Olivier, let me turn back to you and then ask a follow-up question. On the last Global Refugee Forum, so we again reiterated calls for high-quality data to be collected and for the engagement with the academic community. How do you think UNHCR is achieving this, and what do you see as barrier to be effectively delivering on this endeavor?
So how do we achieve to collect high quality data? I will mention some of our tools, but I would like to say also something. First, high quality data are needed. We know it, to measure all the things that were said during this conference, the implementation of solutions. Robert Piper mentioned it. The impact of refugees and displaced on the host communities, their impact on the local labor markets, etc. To measure the animosity of the people towards refugees, or to assess the views of the host communities regarding the right to work. High quality data are also necessary to advocate based on evidence and facts. And it also allows us to put things in perspectives and call a spade a spade. But when you are mentioning the barriers, I would like to say that the data, the final objective of the data is to protect people. So we should not disconnect our willingness to collect data from the necessity to protect the people. I really like the intervention of the founders and director of the African School Economics, who mentioned the time where he was a refugee, because I think that we all understood from his short intervention that behind the data we have people. So to produce high quality data, we need to build trust. And then our data will also build trust, because we will have good data that we will share with government, that we will share with the civil society, as I said, with students, with the young, and this will build trust. And when we build trust, we can convince people even to change their mind about some policies. What does that mean? That with regard to the barriers, when I was a young protection officer, most of the barriers is when I wanted to go fast, when I was not listening to the people first. You can spend 3 months collecting data and 3 months without collecting data, just listening to the people. Building trust, friendship, they know you, you know them. You will see that the way you collect data will be much faster and easier after. So let's take the time. The time of the people is not always our time. We want to go fast, we have deadline, blah, 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 blah. They don't have deadlines, they are just trying to survive. We are the one cutting people in humanitarian, development, cluster, education, blah, blah, blah. A refugee, just like everybody here in this place, he wants to put his kids in school, he wants to make a living, he wants to become someone tomorrow. We should never forget that we are collecting data to reach this specific goal. So let's not disconnect data, research from protection. I think this is very important. Now, coming back to our tools, we are usually in places where nobody else is. We are on the front line as UNHCR people. It helps us to collect data. We have also technology. We are using a Progress. Progress is a fantastic tool that allows us to respond quite effectively when the people are arriving. It's these are humanitarian data, protection data, which allow us to have a good sense of who has arrived, the number of males, females, children, the main protection problems that they are facing, and what are their immediate needs. We can also pull out reports from Progress, which can inform the humanitarian community about the profile of the people who just arrived. And we provide statistics. Many of us know the UNHCR statistics. It's usually based on Progress. Progress is also helping us to build the solution of tomorrow. For instance, when we are printing documentation, voluntary repatriation form, or when we are providing documentation like refugee certificates before building a government ID cards, it helps refugees to be protected. But it's not enough, because Progress is a set of humanitarian data, protection data, but these are not data for development. So we realized that we were missing that part, and this is why now we have worked on something else, which is the forced displacement survey, that we are usually, which is a tool that we are using with government. Progress, we are more and more doing it with the government, but when you have a large influx of refugees crossing the border, sometimes UNHCR is alone on the front line. With the FDS, we have to do it with government. It's a tool that is designed to standardize, streamline, and produce high-quality social economic data on refugees and host communities, also their living conditions, and it's aligned with international statistical standards. So it's a very powerful tool. We have done it as a pilot in different countries like South Sudan, Cameroon, Pakistan, and it's comparable with data collected by other key survey programs through face-to-face household interviews. So this is what we have done. What we need to do more maybe is to also collect beyond the demographic data, the social economic data, more anthropological data. Because even when we are talking about Burkinabe refugees, they are very different. Some are coming from urban cities, some are coming from rural areas, some are single, some are married, some are divorced, some are young, some are old. So all these things are not always captured in our data. So based on this, I would like to ask you, Aisha, what is the Joint Data Centers doing to fill the data and evidence gaps and to improve the quality of data? Most importantly, the data and evidence is only as good as it is used. But what are you doing to operationalize the data and evidence in the hands of practitioners and policymakers?
Thank you very much, Olivier. I think I want to pick up on one important word that you said earlier, working with the government. I think on our operationalization, I think on my previous response a little bit I touch upon it, but in working with the government. So I think we all heard the different policymakers that were here. You heard about Somalia, you heard about Madame from Central African Republic, but also from Côte d'Ivoire. If we want data that's all comparable and that could really have a direct link into inclusion from national system, we have to be supporting national surveys, no? So as a joint data center, so we took for our strategy for 2024-27 as a first strategic priority, systematic inclusion of the forcibly displaced in national statistics. And here, we're working with national statistical offices to try to see how do we ensure inclusion of the forcibly displaced in national surveys. We talk about DHSs. We see many of the research that you have pulled, data and analysis from DHSs. We talk about mix. We talk about household budget survey, which is the tool of programming if you're thinking about for the World Bank. But any national survey, we want to make sure that we have a refugee or forcibly displaced stratum in those national surveys, so that when we're thinking about national system inclusion, then it's more straightforward. And this is the data that government produces, knows, and fully comparable with host. The other thing that we are also doing, this is the ideal situation that we work with national statistics. It may not always be possible, right? But we still have, operational needs, or we have opportunity to drive some policy, discussion. And this is where we're looking at. And this is where I see, again, we could be partnering with academia, through World Bank and UNHCR offices to do some targeted data production, to be supporting those operational needs, or looking at, driving some policy discussion. And that's our second strategic priority. As a third strategic priority, we also want to be leveraging, some of the innovative, cool stuff that you guys are testing that we could be scaling up, And then also, in terms of technology, in terms of methodology. So how do we, leverage those and then really use a joint data center to be, scaling up, so that we have also a demonstration effects to convince the government that you could be also, doing this on a very cost-effective way. So you talked about the FDS, no? So I think, there's a lot that we're looking at, contributing, working through national system where possible so that we can drive a greater inclusion, and if not, working on the side to also have that demonstration effect. And then obviously, our resources are super constrained. We are going to be leveraging, all the massive World Bank investment on statistical capacity building in countries to be continuing also, working with national system to collect data, working with national system to collect data that will be supporting and driving some of these, policy discussion. I think we're running a little bit out of time. So in the matter of wrapping up, if you were to have some closing remarks, Olivier, at the sunset of this conference, what would those be? Thank you.
Today, thank you, Aisha. Today we are talking a lot about sustainable programming. We want to go beyond first head emergency response to the next step. First, because refugees are staying usually more than 10 years in exiles. Second, because forced displacement is on the rise. We are talking about over 120 million possibly displaced people globally. 3, humanitarian needs have risen also significantly. 4, humanitarian funding is shrinking. 5, laws and conventions protecting refugees are interpreted more and more restrictively as the stay of refugees prolongs and funding reduce. There was therefore a need to do things differently. But in fact, in the field, we were already trying to do things differently. It's just that the system was not allowing us to do it differently. The only way for us to build something beyond the immediate response, I'm talking now about UNHCR, was to look for humanitarian funding. There was no other way. But we knew that it was not enough. I'm happy now to see that we were right with this perception, because now more and more it's becoming part of the system that we need to do something more, that we need to bridge the gap between the emergency response and pave the way for the development response, and making sure that refugees will be able to make a living. Before, we already had this in one of the 3 durable solutions that we were promoting. It was local integration. It was about self-reliance already at that time. It's just that we did not have always the tools, we did not have the expertise, we didn't know how to do it, and we had this illusion that a humanitarian who is not a businessman can do it. This was wrong. Today, we are working more with the others. We are building partnerships, non-transactional partnership. What we are trying to do is a whole society approach to tell people we need to join forces, because displacement is on the rise and we need to do something about it. For instance, in the multi-country office that I'm operating, that I'm covering, we have only 140,000 refugees in the 5 countries. We are not like in Chad, we are not like in some other countries facing millions of refugees. But how do we work about prevention? How do we build the foundation so that if tomorrow we have 500,000 refugees, we have already the schools, we have already the classrooms, we have already a way to support them with the government. We need to build alliances. So to make a difficult word simple, sustainable programming is about looking at the future and see what alliances we could make to protect better the people. And this is the philosophy of the Global Compact on refugees and the cornerstone of the international protection regime, because in its preamble, the 1951 Convention is mentioning that protection can only happen if there is solidarity between states. So for me, these are part of maybe my closing remarks with you guys, with your research, with the outcome of your papers. How are we going to convince people that refugees are not only victims, but that they are contributing to the wealth of the country, that refugees can become taxpayers if we trust them, if we open them access to our financial institution, if we give them documentation? How can we transfer them from assets, from assets? For me, after so many years, well, I've been trying to work on solution, because the mandate of UNHCR is to respond, protect, and find solution. I realized that even in the good examples of solutions, most of our refugees are still in the informal sector. How do you become an asset if you are in the informal sector? You are invisible. You become visible for a Ministry of Finance when you are paying taxes. You see? So we need to do much more, and I really would like to thank all of you, because your research paper will help us tomorrow to include refugees in the development plans and not leaving them behind. In my experience, we have worked a lot within the United Nations to include the vulnerable people in the policies of the government. But believe me, as a practitioner, the foreigners, the refugees, the migrants are often the one left behind, even in countries with good policies, for a series of reasons that we already mentioned today. So I don't want to come back on this. So this is what I would like to say. Big thanks to all of those who contributed to this research. I have usually no time to attend this kind of conference. I'm always with my feet on the front line, talking with refugees, etc. But it's good sometimes to pause, to reflect, to listen to you. Maybe my commitment will be that I will read more on Saturdays and Sunday evenings. And learn more, because you have done terrific jobs. You went to the field. You did not do it telewalking or what remotely. You went to the field. You went to Ethiopia. You went to Mozambique, etc. And I could feel something that I still feel after 30 years with UNHCR. I can still feel your patience. You were really passionate about your work, and I really thank you for this. I would like to be again a young guy with full of patience, but anyway. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the organizers. Thanks for the wonderful conference. Because I think this conference will generate more empathy towards refugees, more solidarity with the displaced, and maybe generate political will to include them in the UN framework and the government framework. So no, Aisha, I think that I said what I had to say, and I would like to conclude after my conclusions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Let me just echo those thanks, to all of you guys, that I know that there's conflict in calendar, there's time, there's commitment, but you made the time to come in here, present your work, So if you recall, one of the objectives that I said at the beginning was this conference was we're bringing it to Africa, so we can stimulate. We know that we've come a long way in terms of greater research on the continent. So we've long along, but we still have so much grounds to cover. So I think one of the objectives that we will really pursuing as bringing here in Abidjan, in the region, is how do we contribute into stimulating even greater research on Africa, where we have, again, 40% of the forcibly displaced that are here, and the rest, the remaining of it, distributed across the other 4 continents. I think that's, for me, that's something that was very important. We also saw the policymakers of the region coming in. Also, we also wanted to be, sensitize them about, some of these issues. Many of those, they're in the process of looking at, development plan, and as we're thinking about bridging the nexus, this is so for us, this was also important to bring this as part of those conversations. And I think holding it in the region was also one of the, one of that objective. The other thing that I wanted to say is also thanking the organizing community. Domenico has not been sleeping over the last 2 months and a half. So thank you, Domenico. Thank you, Catherine. Taka is online. Thank you. Exactly. We don't see so much that's going on. And then one of the complications of coming in the region is like it's some of those things don't just line up because we want them to line up, right? So thank you very much for that. I also wanted to thank the selection committee of the paper, Tuan here. We have Professor Eneman that's not with us here, and Taka. Taka, we've not seen you at all. That also have, helping to, curating out of the 150 papers that we have had, the 21 that was presented here today. I'd like also to acknowledge and thank all of the students of the African School of Economics that you have been seeing, our volunteers, that have really been super helpful on that, and then also the participants from the UNHCR and the World Bank that have also traveled to be with us here to interact with the different, researchers. Madame la Ministre, Saïda Libya. So thank you so much, shukran jazilan. So merci beaucoup. So I think we have a lot of homework, Maya and I, to do. So when we come back, don't be surprised that you receive a call and say, "Can you please come and present to the World Bank and UNHCR team? Can you please come and we're organizing this platform with policymakers. We want you to be coming in." And then obviously Domenico is going to be bothering you on the marketplace because he has to deliver on that this calendar year, So, but really, thank you very, very much, and I hope the conversation is going to be continuing. We're already fast forwarding into our next research conference, and we have a lot of food for thought for that one, into thinking of our next conference. And please, let's continue the interaction. Let us know how we can support, make your work more visible, putting it to the hand of the policymakers, the practitioner. And thank you, Maya and I are super grateful of your presence. Thank you, and thank you. Safe travels for those going back. Thank you.
Let's please stand up. Christian, viens ici. Let's stand up. Because we are in Ivory Coast, we will do it the Ivorian way. Viens ici, viens, dépêche-toi. On va répéter. We are going to upload the Ivorian way. Okay, voilà. So listen to the teacher.
Right here.
Okay, we will on. Free play. You take it after. Free play.
Voilà, now we can go.